Hey everyone, yesterday we had started our new unit on data and we had gone through lesson 4.1, which was different techniques to collect the data and then having that data, then being able to visualize it through some sort of a diagram, usually a graph like a bar graph or a histogram or scatter plot. Once having that visual representation of your data, you can then make conclusions or predictions about that information. So today's video pretty much has the same purpose. You still want to be able to analyze the data so that you can make predictions or conclusions. But in lesson 4.2, data analysis, we're now going to do that mathematically instead of visually. Okay, so there are two things in this video that I'm going to be going over. One is the central tendency, and then two is going to be the measures of spread. So I kind of want to explain both, zoom out a little bit so that you guys can see this diagram. Central tendency basically means, and I'm going to use an example that's very common. How are you doing in this course? Like if I were to ask you, what do you think your mark is in this course? You're going to gather information based on your performance so far. That's usually your marks on, say, quizzes, tests, assignments, and that is all of your data that you have so far. You can arrange it from smallest to largest in terms of your percentages. And then the central tendency means, well, is most of your data centralized on the left-hand side, which means that you're performing more on the low end? Is it centralized on, like, do you have a lot of data on the right-hand side, which it means that you're performing quite well, or are you performing pretty average in the middle, right? So where is most of your data? That's basically what central tendency means. Okay, now there's several different ways that you can calculate that. And I think the one that we know the most, that we're most familiar with, is your average. So the average, or in other words, your mean, is where you take the sum total of all of your data. So you're going to add up all your test marks. Then you're going to divide by however many numbers of data you have. So you're going to divide by how many tests you've taken. And that's pretty much how a lot of us feel like we do in a course, is just by adding all of our test scores together and then dividing it by how many tests we took. And that's not wrong. It's just one way of analyzing the data. Now, the median is actually what it sounds like. It's the middle entry. So if you were to line up, arrange all of your data, your test scores from smallest to largest, where is that middle test score? So that is another way that you could potentially say, okay, hey, I'm scoring this in the course, and this is my middle entry, my middle data point, and therefore I think that's how I'm possibly doing the course. Your mode is a little bit different. Like these two are kind of similar. Mode is a little bit different where it's the most frequent number in the data set. In other words, if you were scoring, different scores on your test, but you seem to be scoring, say, on a lot of your tests, um, 75%, 75%, 75%, and making an educated guess, hey, I think I'm getting 75% in the course, that would be a pretty good way to determine how you think you'll be doing, or at least that's where most of your data seems to be. Okay, so all of those things kind of describe where you think the majority of your data, like where the peak is going to be. Okay, the measures of spread is a little bit different. So measures spread means like from your lowest to your highest score, how spread out is your data. So you could have very, like maybe you didn't have a great day and you had like really low score tests versus some really great days and you had high score tests. And so your spread would be very wide, like in curve C. Whereas curve A, possibly this student, from their lowest test score to their highest, they generally have a really small range. And so they're generally testing pretty much the same marks all the time. Um, and so both of these ideas of central tendency and measures of spread give you an idea of what your data looks like. without even actually having to draw a picture. Now, if you were to draw a picture, you can calculate something called quartiles, which is, where I guess like, how you have a middle entry, you have your lower and your upper bands. What is the middle of that left side and the middle of that right side, and being able to visualize that, that's actually called a box and whisker plot. And so I've told you a lot about all these different words. Why don't we start to show you how they're actually calculated? So here's an example. Example 1, I gave you a data set of 15 numbers. You don't have to, but it might be a good idea at the very beginning to order this from smallest to largest. And so I did that in yellow over here later on. Didn't really need it for the first question, but I did need it for the second question. But I mean, having it ordered at the very beginning kind of helps. So see how there's like the smallest number is 1 and there's 2 of them? I put 2 ones right there. And then there's no 2s, but there's like a couple 3s, 1, 2, 3 3s. So you write out 3 3s, and then the next number would be 5. And it looks like there's only 1 5. There's no 4s. So I put 1 5, and like you know how to do this. You just put it all in order, right? Until you hit your highest. And just as like a little tip, you might want to count up how many numbers you have written down, because there should have been 15 and sometimes, you miss one. So just make sure you have 15 afterwards. But having them all in order helps you to answer several questions, such as determine the mode. And remember that the mode was the most frequent number. And having them all arranged like this and ordered, I can definitely see that there are 3 3s and 3 7s, but there's like 2 of everything else, or maybe even just 1. So the most frequent numbers, or the modes, are the number 3 and the number 7. Now, it also asks you to determine the mean. So the mean is the average. It doesn't matter if they're all ordered or they're not ordered, but when you calculate the mean, you're just going to add up all the numbers on the top, and it should be the same if you ordered them. I got a total of 83, and then you divide it by how many numbers you have, which is 15. So 83 divided by 15, approximately 5.5. I like to put an extra decimal number after the decimal, just to make sure that I'm more accurate. But because it wasn't exactly 5.5, I put an approximation dot. So in general, the average number of this entire set is about 5.5. But if they're going to ask for the median, remember that means the middle number. If you have it all in like wonky order like this, you're going to think that the middle number is like 8 or 3. Like if you count up like, okay, these are the end numbers, these are the second numbers, and these are the third numbers, and you kind of go towards the middle by doing this upside down rainbow thing, like you get to the middle, which is 8, but that's not really the median. You have to do it when it's in order from smallest to largest. So when you do your kind of upside down pairing like that, you'll find out that the middle number actually is 6. And that number is very similar to the mean number approximately. Okay, so that's mean, median, and mode, right? Which are your central tendency calculations. Now, if we were going to say start to analyze the spread, one of the words we had talked about was range. And so the range of the numbers is from smallest to largest. And so the range is about 8 units, which is you're taking your highest number minus your lowest number, so about 8. Okay. If we talk about quartiles, then what you do, and this is where it gets like a tiny bit more complicated. A quartile is, first of all, taking your median number, okay, and then your first or lower quartile is going to be the middle of your lower band. So your lower portion of your data, that means like your smallest number all the way to the number before your median is going to be your lower band, and then it's the middle of that number. This is your first quartile. Your third quartile, so this is your second quartile, is the median. Your third quartile is your upper quartile, which on your upper band, so the highest number all the way to like the right side of your median, the middle one of those is called your upper quartile. So it's the middle of that upper band. Now, those two green numbers and the pink number plus the two end numbers will help you to visualize your data and the distribution of your data. Okay, so we can draw something called a box and whisker plot. By the way, an interquartile range just generally means the range between the lower quartile to the upper quartile. So just a simple subtraction. Sorry, let me just grab some water. Much better. Okay. All right. So if you're in my class, which I don't know, I have other subscribers, and I'm sorry I use like these videos now just to, if I'm away, I make a video. So they're kind of really random. But yes, if you're in my class right now, you probably have this lesson right in front of you, and you have a much better graph than I have right here. But just follow what I say. So I'm going to now draw the lower and upper limits of our data, which was 1 for the lowest and 9. I first need to have a scale. So on your arrow at the bottom, you want to make sure that you provide a scale that includes 1 all the way up to 9. So I started at 0. You want to start at 0. And then I went a little bit past, all the way up until 10. So I divided the data up into equal parts of 3, just so that it was very consistent. I put a dot somewhere above. It doesn't really matter too much. I put it maybe like about 6 blocks above, and a dot that represents the lower portion of my data, and then a dot at the same height, by the way, to represent the upper portion of my data. Okay. Now we actually put in the numbers for the median, which was 6, and my lower quartile and my upper quartile, which was 3 and 8. And so if you want to, just along the same line, put a dot right here for the Q1, put a dot right here at 6 for your Q2, and put a dot right here for your Q3. Now, on each of those 3 dots, you just extend the line up and down because you're going to be drawing your box now. So extend the line the same length, and then you're going to enclose those and make a box. So that's why they call it a box, and these are the whiskers plot. Okay, so by drawing this, it actually shows you A, your range of your data, B, where the middle of your data is, C, where the spread of, the lower band, see how like it's actually quite spread out. Like if I, so sorry, it's quite spread out on this side. It's not as spread out on this side. So it shows you kind of like the spread of your data. Like your data seems to be more right skewed. All of your data seems to be on, the peak of your data seems to be more on the right side than on the left side. And I just want to show you in comparison, if we look at the data itself, if this is the middle, from 6 to 9, 9 minus 6 is 3. So there's only 3 potential numbers over here. But from 1 to 6, there's like 5 potential numbers over here. Like there's 1s, potentially 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. Like a lot of spread is over here versus not as much spread over here. Okay, for the same number of data points. All right, so this kind of gives you an idea of how to conclude, like make conclusions about the numbers that you were given. Now, since the numbers that we were given don't really have anything associated with them, it just tells us a little bit more about the numbers themselves. Okay, so that's today's lesson on data analysis.